Hey everybody, Brogar here. Going to be talking to you guys a little bit about how to hot drop into boot camp today. I just figured this is a spot that we all know and love, and I'm sure some people would like some input on just how to do it successfully, how to do it without hiding in a corner the entire time, and just how to walk out of it and win the game after the fact. So let's talk about it a little bit. It's kind of cool. First thing that is really relevant is making sure your drop is good. So generally speaking, if you're going for lobster, which we're gonna call this building right here in the middle lobster, because it looks like a lobster with two big claws. If you're going for lobster, you honestly really either need to get as ideal of a shoot as possible or go first floor and try to establish a foothold. In order to do as good of a job as you possibly can with jumping, my suggestion is to jump really, really far away, go directly parallel with the ground for quite a while, and then about 150 meters, about 150 meters away from your target destination, hit shift and try to break to over 231 kilometers an hour while you're going down for speed. If you don't break that, you probably shouldn't land lobster. If you don't jump early and look like you're competitive with your jump, you probably should just either go first floor or figure out another building that nobody else is going to. Because one of the worst things about hot dropping is when you're just kind of the chum in the water and you get eaten up right away as soon as you land because you didn't find a gun, or somebody was just at a gun a second before you and you just get chased down and murdered. So, in the seconds after you land, if you get a gun, sometimes you really have one of two choices. You either have a really good opportunity to kill somebody immediately, and in that case, if it's within like a 5-second or so period of time that you can get somebody, then go right ahead and YOLO run right at them and push them and try to kill them, knock them off the face of the earth so you don't have to worry about them, and you can start to establish a foothold wherever you are in boot camp. If you can't kill them in 5 to 10 seconds tops, then you need to maybe just chill for a second, figure out your life in boot camp, how many enemies you have, because I can't tell you how many times you get the gun and you start chasing somebody and they're getting away from you, and all of a sudden it's been 20 seconds or whatever and they're not dead, and all of a sudden you're getting pushed by somebody else and you get squeezed in a shit sandwich, and it's not fun. So just for either you get an opportunity to kill someone immediately, under 10 seconds in my opinion, or figure out your life and start methodologically dealing with threats in boot camp so you can kill people and not get murdered simultaneously, because that's the ideal, right? And often just running at people does not work, especially in solos. So figure it out, piece people apart, get your peaks going. Don't just sprint at people and let them hear your footsteps and pre-aim you and pre-fire you into oblivion. So when it comes to gunfighting in boot camp, a lot of it's really close quarters combat. So your peaks and the speed of your peaks and your shots are really, really relevant, because if you get hit a couple times by a guy down the hallway from you, he's just going to run at you and ADS you when you try to peek him again and blast you one more time and you're dead, or he's just going to rush right at you until you're dead. At least you gotta be ready for that if they do. So not getting tagged up more than once when somebody hits you is really, really important. So you really need to make sure you're not over peaking, you're not holding your peak for too long, you're not holding the same peaks, and you're not just kind of running around with your head cut off for the majority of the time. Whenever I'm in a fight with a really good player on boot camp, which you'll regularly come across pros, very high level players in boot camp, because it's one of the most popular spots to drop in the game. But if I'm in a one-on-one in a solo or something with a really good player, one thing you'll notice them do is that, especially if it's like a peak battle from building to building or something, is they'll often not peak the same spot back to back. They'll be switching peaks constantly, switching angles constantly, and just they don't care about getting the kill. They're just trying to get it working a headshot on you over time, break up your vest and just make you use up your meds, then all of a sudden they'll have a much better chance of being able to take you down in one headshot or so. But you'll notice really good players are going to be not giving you much of an opportunity to hit them, and they're going to be switching up their peaks a ton. These types of fights, though, are probably some of the most fun fights that you can get into on PUBG, and you learn a lot, and it just feels like a completely different game when you're playing against a really good player in that kind of context. It's a lot of fun. There's a difference between pushing buildings in solos, duos, and squads when it comes to landing in boot camp. It's a lot harder to push out in solos because you don't have anybody covering your back on your push. You just gotta hope for the most part that nobody's gonna third party you. So generally speaking, I'm more conservative when it comes to pushing buildings on boot camp in solos as opposed to duos and squads, just because you just get shot in the back a lot because you never know when somebody's gonna show up at a 90-degree angle from your push and just blast you in the side of the head. But and when you do want to push, usually it's after you got a pretty good idea what the lay of the land is in boot camp. You've killed a few people, you know you're fighting with somebody and you've hit tags on them and you want to finish the damn thing and put that person in the ground a lot faster than hopefully somebody can get to you as a third party. In duos and squads, it's a lot more obvious. Somebody should cover the push in most situations. So if one person in duo is pushing up, the other guys got Overwatch or playing anchor and watching if the enemy that their teammate is pushing peaks so that they can hit tags and make that push successful, and then they can follow up. In squads, it's even easier to cover your teammates while they push because there's just more of you. So 1, 2, even 3 people push while 1 or 2 people stay back and cover for the peaks. One thing about the lobster in boot camp is that it's really easy to sneak into, especially when you're only in a solo or a duo. So it's not very easy to cover all of the lobster, even as a duo. As a squad, it's a lot easier to do, so you don't get snuck up on as much, but it's pretty easy to sneak into the lobster and get all the way upstairs without you ever hearing it if they're crouching and walking really quietly. To that end, if you're in lobster and defending it, make sure, especially in solos, you just stay in an area where you can't get shot from the other side of lobster, and even close the doors when you're leaving one side of lobster, because those doors opening provide barrier and sound cues for you. Something that's really important to have when you are playing with teammates, duo mate, squad mates, whatever, is to have good call outs when you're fighting in boot camp. Making sure you're calling out things properly it's really relative to you and your squad mates or duo partner, but so long as you guys understand what each other is calling out. For example, me and my squad mates will often just say things like second floor 3 stack, or if my team's on a completely different angle and not looking where I'm looking, I'll say north 3 stack, so that they know the north 3 story, the building I'm in right now, has a guy in it. Also calling out the relevant window, especially if your teammates are peeking on that side, is also a helpful indicator. When it comes to pushing lobster, it's just ideal to make sure you're pushing from angles that are hard to kill you from. So running across those metal bridges is usually a pretty bad place to run and easy to hit, especially if there's a squad in there or a duo in there. Make sure you have some knock or some tags on the opponents if you're trying to make that push. And once you get in there, again, establish a foothold on either a room or an area and see if they just push to you. You don't have to sit in there. You're not going to sit in there forever, but just make sure you're not about to get pieced out because you're sprinting and they'd moved position and you're running right into their barrels. The last thing I want to go over is just some common rotation paths and choke points that exist around boot camp that you should be aware of, so that when you're trying to rotate out of or moving to this new circles, you can anticipate other players' movements and know your best options. These red circles are the choke points that are common to have gunfights at. Usually they're directly in relation to the fact that there's good pathing to where people need to go for rotations that avoids boot camp angles from boot camp. And to be honest, in public games, a lot of people would prefer to not go into boot camp in the late game because they just don't want to die like that. They're afraid to die. So you end up seeing people in the same spots. You end up seeing close quarters fighting in the same spots too. And these are just a handful of areas where you can see that happen more often. These blue arrows are indicators of like where you can anticipate to see foot traffic. These are often going to be just the paths around boot camp that people are going to take to avoid it in rotations, and they're going to be the same areas that you find a lot of those choke points and fights occur. But also these are going to be just where people are going to be moving through, and you know what, they're going to take a peek with their Kar 98 or M24 and see if they can see some rodent down in boot camp and take some shots at you. So take some peeks at these hills every now and then. You might spot somebody and you might be able to hit a banger for that sweet montage. And then the last illustrations here are these red arrows, which are just your options for rotating away from boot camp. Once you're forced to leave and you don't get the once in a blue moon beloved boot camp finish game, these are your paths options that I think are pretty good for departing from boot camp without getting easily mowed down because you have no cover because the path you chose was garbage. So just consider some of these paths as you're leaving, and I think generally speaking you'll be pretty well off. There's really generally a lot of cover leaving boot camp. Unless you're getting hard gate kept, it should be pretty easy to do. Okay, this is it for this little guide on hot dropping in boot camp. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you guys learned a couple things. I know I've learned the hard way enough on boot camp and just hot dropping in general that I hopefully have learned a couple things to pass on to you. Let me know if you guys have any questions about boot camp or in terms of other hot drops you might like to see me talk about and give some input on in the future. So thanks, take care, see you on stream.